I believe in the power of repetition. Repetition in my life has played an integral role in all the great successes I've ever achieved. And 2 years ago, I started a new morning ritual. I start every day off by saying, today, something great's going to happen to me. And you know what it's done? It's wired my brain to look for the simple stuff in my life and really find things that I can appreciate out of every day that I get to live. And every night when I go to bed, I find myself in a position where I can go to sleep and know that I've had an awesome day. The greatest thing to ever happen to me in my life, it actually started off as the worst thing. It was close to killing me twice. First as an accident, but the second time as an event completely orchestrated by me. I'm going to take you on a journey tonight. A journey around self-belief and the opinions of others and the influence they had on my life. This journey we're going to touch on the highest of highs, but before we get there, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to touch on the lowest of lows. This is my journey about pain, power, inner peace, and turning the worst thing that ever happened to me into the greatest gift I've ever been given, the gift of time. Unfortunately, the 9 people who died by suicide in Australia today, they won't have that gift of more time. They won't have the gift of waking up tomorrow morning and smelling the beautiful, cool Brisbane winter morning. And they won't have the ability of hugging someone ever again. My journey starts in October of 2002. Working as a painter, I arrived at a job site not far from here in the south of Brisbane. I was taken to the 3rd story. I was given a simple task. Just sweep the plaster joints, Tynan. That's all you have to do. The boss then returned to the ground floor, where moments later, he heard a loud thud. He then heard some weird moaning noises, which confused him. He then found me. I'd just fallen 3 stories, or 5.5 meters landing on concrete. My life as I knew it was over. Somehow I managed to get up off the ground and make my way to the garage before again collapsing, this time into a fit and into a coma. It was around this time that my luck on that day was actually with me, because a lady had just arrived home from her shift as a nurse in the emergency ward at the Brisbane hospital. And she sensed something was up and came over, and she effectively kept me alive until the paramedics arrived. Now I was taken off to hospital, and as you might imagine, after falling that far onto concrete, I was in a pretty bad way. I was on life support, I was in a coma. I'd effectively broken the entire right side of my body. I had fractured my skull, I had a brain hemorrhage, I'd broken both my wrists, I'd punctured lungs, I'd broken my ribs, I'd broken my hip, I'd bruised my spine. And I think I had some bruises, but I'm not sure if that was from my mum slapping me for being so silly. My family was eventually contacted and told to get to the hospital as soon as they could, because at that point in time, the doctors didn't think that I was going to survive. I did survive. However, the journey that was ahead of me would push me to my limits. It put me in a position where I had to continuously find new limits and ask questions of myself that I didn't think I'd ever have to ask, just to stay alive. Around 3 days into this ordeal, I woke from the coma. And at first, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was, and I didn't know why I was there at all. I had to learn to speak again. Not words as such, but sentences, and actually linking words together to have a conversation and deliver a message. I had to learn to walk again. I had to learn to do some more basic things like wash myself, and something more intimate, like actually go to the toilet by myself. After a month in intensive care, I was moved to a brain injury ward. Now this is a place that I truly hope none of you ever have to experience from my perspective. It was the scariest place I've ever been to, and a place that really put me into a position where I had to do something and take control of my life. I was so fortunate that when I got to leave that place and go and live with my mum and brother and start recovering. And a few weeks into my recovery, my mum got me a gift, a blue heeler cattle dog, who I called Tamiga. Now Tamiga's story was that she was 6 weeks old, she was on the streets, and she'd been picked up in the pound. She'd been treated badly. She was also in a group of dogs at the pound that was exposed to a deadly disease, and they didn't think that she was actually going to survive. My mum said God tells her that she would survive, so she took her home. And when she gave it to me and told me the story about Tamega, my response was, "Why are you giving me a dog that's going to die, Mum? Come on!" Tamega didn't die. But at first, I hated Tamega. I didn't want anything to do with her. But she loved me instantly. She followed me everywhere I went. She sat when I sat, she slept when I slept, and she walked when I walked. After a few weeks, Tamega and I became the best of friends. I didn't want to go anywhere without her. She taught me about a little bit of responsibility, and she brought some joy into my life. You see, Tamega had a nasty habit. While she was a pup, she'd wet herself when she got excited, and this at times meant on the laps of people who she was so desperate to meet. I was also fortunate in this time to have a select group of friends, some of which are here tonight, up the back there. But there's one mate in particular who's not here, my mate Simo. Now Simo tells me that he came and visited me pretty much every single day. He'd come in for a chat and he'd sit down. He'd tell me about his day, he'd tell me about the beach, he'd tell me about girls, and I'd get up and just walk away. I'd go sleep for an hour or 4 or 5, but when I came back, Simo was still there, and again with the chat. I didn't want Simo to be there and talk to me, but I was glad that he was. And despite the fact that I never spoke back to him, I'm glad that he kept speaking to me. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the thing I learn about when you're down is that you are going to have moments of joy. You're going to have moments when you'd like to do something, interact with people. And I was fortunate to have a select group of friends that stuck with me and showed me love. The return to home life, it wasn't all roses. As you can imagine from my injuries, I had a lot of recovery to get stuck into. And this meant my weeks were filled with doctor's appointments. Now they had a benefit. They got me out of the house. They got me an opportunity to interact with people and learn how to have conversations again. And they gave me a little bit of purpose. However, on the flip side, the messages that I was continually getting back from these team of GPs, it was all negative. It started to paint a picture. It started to paint a belief in my mind that something went wrong that day. That day when I had that accident, I should have died. I shouldn't be alive. I should be dead. And that belief, that came with me everywhere I went. It was always sitting on my shoulder. And even my moments of joy, it was still sitting there on my shoulder saying, "How can you be happy? Look at what's happened to you. Come on." It was around 18 months into my accident that I got sent off to a team of doctors to get an assessment done to determine the full extent of my disability and find out how impaired I was. I actually arrived at this assessment feeling really optimistic. I actually thought that I was going to sit down in front of this team of doctors, they were going to assess me, and they were going to say, "Tynan, we've made a mistake. You're actually fine. You've recovered. You're good to go. Have an awesome life." A few days later, the results came in. 57% permanent impairment. I had the IQ of a 10-year-old. I was absolutely gutted. And it was in this moment that that belief that had been with me for a long time about something happening wrong on that day and me should have died, that thought metamorphed. It metamorphed into a belief that I now actually have to take some action on that. I have to do something to correct that injustice in my life. And I have to do something now because I don't want to be a burden on my friends and family and society forever. I just really don't. I had a belief that taking action would fix everything, and ultimately, it would end the pain that I felt. I woke one morning knowing it was the day to take action. I said goodbye to Tamega. And I went through with it. And what happened next, I never expected. As I found myself on the bottom of the pool looking up, Tamega stuck her head in and she started barking at me. I freaked. Despite the fact I didn't care about my life, I cared about hers. So I kicked off the bottom and I ended it. I sat on the edge of the pool with Tamika, crying for hours, repeatedly just saying to her, I don't want to die, Tamika, I really don't. It's just I don't want to live that belief in my mind that's going to be my reality. I just don't want to live that. That day, that moment, it's the most pain I've ever felt. It's the most real I've ever felt, and it's the most lost I've ever felt. The events that soon happened after that moment, today, they still give me goosebumps. They provide perspective and clarity in my life, and they make me happy. Sitting at home, flicking through the TV, on comes this show, the 1995 Hawaii Ironman. What is this show? A triathlon? I see a guy, John McLean, an Australian. John's ambition for that day was to be the first wheelchair athlete to complete the Ironman in a wheelchair. For those of you who don't know what an Ironman is, it's a 3.8 kilometre swim, 180 kilometre bike ride, followed that up by a 42 kilometre run. And John was going to do that with just his arms. See, John had been hit by a truck some years earlier, and he went through some stuff that I was going through. He leant forward in his chair and he spoke to me. He said, I've got a message for one person out there. One person who's going through some hard times. Don't just be a spectator to life. Don't just be a spectator. It grabbed me like a ton of bricks. That message was for me. And in that instant, something happened to me. That old belief of wanting to die, it was dead. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life planning my next attempt. I wasn't going to just sit there and watch time go by. I was going to do an Ironman. I still believe as much as I do today as I did back then that that message John had, it really was for me. It was John calling me, daring me to try, daring me to live. I took that challenge. It became my new secret. The old one, it was dead. The secret of Ironman, and hearing those 4 words, you are an Ironman, it consumed my life. And in that instant, the greatest thing to ever happen to me was born. It was born out of the depths of depression, hopelessness, and the opinions of others. Sure, I wasn't fixed physically, but mentally, I felt unstoppable. I could handle the pain, I could handle the negative reports from the doctors. I didn't care. I sat there smiling as they told me their diagnosis, saying to myself, I'll prove you wrong. I'll prove it to everyone. I'll hear those words. But chasing those words, believe me, it was hard. It was hard, ladies and gentlemen, learning to run again with what felt like a lead weight stuck to my hip after it had been broken. It was hard hopping on a bike and realising that my brain couldn't process images fast enough once I went above 15 kilometres an hour and the world just turned into a blur. And it was hard work jumping in a pool, thinking I was fit because I could run 4 kilometres and realising I couldn't swim 10 metres, let alone the 3.8 I needed to get through. But all that, it didn't bother me. I didn't care. I didn't care how hard it was. My future, my life, it depended on it. I had a belief that once I finished an Ironman, I'd be cured. Cured of the accident, cured of my past, and cured of this thing called suicide. Every day I got up and I would push myself a little harder, take another step. Every day I knew that something awesome was going to happen and it was going to be better than the day before it. The road to Ironman happened way faster than I thought. I'd thought in my mind it was going to be around a 5 to 7 year process, not 18 months. My first triathlon was at Bribie Island. I was so happy to have a good group of friends and family there watch me as I swam 300 metres, rode 13 kilometres and ran 3 Ks. As I came through the finish line that day, wow. I was so proud of myself. So proud, in fact, that when I got home, I entered every triathlon I could find for the next 8 months. It became my life. It culminated in 8 months later, me going to a place called Yeppoon to do a half Ironman. Despite the fact I had some upset stomach issues, I finished 7th in my age group. And as I went to the award ceremony with some older guys who were hoping to get a ticket to Ironman Australia, I couldn't believe it. They called my name out. They called me up. They gave me a ticket and said, "You're going to Ironman Australia on the 1st of April 2007. I instantly called my mum and said, "Mum, I'm doing an Ironman. Can you believe it?" She burst into tears. 1 week before that Ironman, I was on my final training run. A run that I didn't need to do, but a run that I wanted to do. And I rolled my ankle. Bad. It ballooned instantly, and I freaked out. That didn't bother me. By the time I arrived at Port Macquarie 2 days later, I'd already arranged physio appointment for every day that week, and not once did I ever contemplate not finishing, let alone not starting the race. And as I walked to the race start that morning, someone stopped and asked me, "How's the ankle, Tynan?" I just looked at them blankly and said, "What are you talking about? There's nothing wrong with my ankle." They just walked off and smiled. As I was waiting for the race start to be, as I was waiting for the cannon to start the race and treading water with the 1,600 other athletes, something happened to me. I had the calmest feeling in my life. The same feeling I get when I look into my beautiful wife's eyes. And I knew everything was going to be okay. 12 hours and 21 minutes later, as I found myself approaching the carpet, I stopped. I looked over my shoulder into the darkness. And then I started to move. As I hit that carpet, ladies and gentlemen, I could see it. Right in that same space where the finish line was. The place where my hopes, my dreams and reality met for the first time. And in that moment, when I crossed that finish line and I heard those words, "You are an Ironman," I was free. I was free, ladies and gentlemen. I was free. Along that road to that Ironman, I learnt so much about myself. I found out who I am and what drives me. And I figured out that no one's opinion of me was ever going to form my reality. Never. I'd never give anyone that ability to do that again. Never. My power was born that day out of knowing who I am, where I'm going, and that no one could ever take that from me. That road to Ironman was an adventure, and the outcome was something that I'd imagined for years before it. And I found inner peace that day, and everything that had happened to me, it had actually happened for me. All that pain, the hard times, the doctor's appointments, it was all worth it. The journey showed me the unlimited ability I had within me. It had been there all along. It was just hidden behind the beliefs of others, and hidden behind a belief that my life would never change. Nothing would ever happen. I took that newfound belief and that belief that I could do anything, and I applied it. I applied it to going to uni. 3.5 years later, I graduated. I couldn't believe that either. Then I took the next step. I left the comfort zone of my family and friends and moved to a place where I knew no one. Cairns. A place where I started working for the government. A place where an amazing friend introduced me to the most beautiful person I've ever met. The person I call my wife, the mother to our son Luca, and the person who I occasionally get to pull out the line when I forget to do something. But Helena, you know I've got brain damage. But standing here, I want you to know something. Me and all of you, we're all the same. We're controlled by our beliefs, but our beliefs, they're controlled by us. I still have days when things get me down and I feel under the world, And truthfully, those thoughts, they're still with me. They're part of who I am, but I'm so proud of who I am. And the other truth is, you can never run from who you truly are. No matter where you go or the story you tell yourself, who you are is who you are forever. And that's a pretty long time. It's only been recent that, since I met Bronwyn, that I've actually learnt the power of sharing my story when I speak about it. And it's my belief that opening up and talking about the events that I've been through in my life, they can help others. They can help others to take a step and open up about their thoughts, share their story. My story brings awareness to a topic that needs to be talked about, a topic that must be spoken about, and a topic that I'll hide from no more. We must come together, all of us, collectively, and try and do something. Everyone has the ability to make a small gain, and collectively, ladies and gentlemen, a world full of small gains equals something much bigger than a small gain, something that can actually make a difference. And isn't that what we all want? To make a difference in people's lives? Our beliefs are so powerful, and you have an amazing power within you, more power than you ever could imagine. I want you to make an effort to live your story and not the story others paint for you. I want you to spend some time and actually learn what your story is. Learn what your story is doing for you, and more importantly, what your story is doing to you. You see, the graveyard is the richest place in the world. There you'll find inventions that we've never been exposed to, people's dreams that never had the opportunity, paintings that were never painted, and stories never told. I'm asking you to help make a difference, help make a change. Now shake someone's hand on your right and left and say, "You're the difference." Wow, you actually did it. It's making that difference, ladies and gentlemen, that can have an impact. How amazing would it be if the 9 people who would die by suicide in Australia tomorrow, imagine if they didn't. Imagine the stories that we're missing out on. Imagine the gifts that we're not getting exposed to. I want you to become the person who picks up the phone and makes the call, the person who sends the text, the person who sends the email. It's so easy in these days to connect to people, but yet we're so disconnected. I want you to be the person who just sits and listens, and become the person who just sits. Why? Because it can have an impact on someone's life. It can make the difference. It can help someone to see that someone does care and the world is worth living for. And I want you to believe. I'll leave you with this. To believe is to know that every day is a new beginning, is to trust that miracles happen and dreams really do come true. To believe is to see angels dancing among the clouds, to know the wonder of a stardust sky and the wisdom of the man in the moon. To believe is to know the value of a nurturing heart, the innocence of a child's eye, and the beauty of an aging hand. For it is through their teachings we learn to love. To believe is to find the strength and courage that lies within us when it's time to pick up the pieces and begin again. To believe is to know that we are not alone, that life is a gift, and this is our time to cherish it. To believe is to know that wonderful surprises are just waiting to happen, and all our hopes and dreams are within reach, if only we believe.